this video, we're going to talk about how to study for the MEE, or the Multistate Essay Examination. So our first tip is to make sure that you have good outlines. This is the first step or the foundation to excelling on the MEE. So what is a good outline, since that's our first tip? A few things to keep in mind if you're shopping bar exam courses or if you're looking at your own outlines and you're trying to make a determination about whether or not you think that they are of good quality. So first things first, they should be of manageable length. If they're hundreds of pages, my guess is that's not incredibly helpful for you because you need to be able to memorize the law. Also, your outlines should be easy to memorize. If they are easy to memorize, this means that that is a good quality outline. Additionally, these outlines should contain examples that help illustrate how things are tested or what a concept means. And finally, another hallmark of a good outline is that it highlights the highly tested areas of law within each subject. If you don't have good outlines, make this your first priority or your first step. Find one that works for you and then purchase those outlines. Our second tip for how to study for the MEE is that you have to understand the law. A lot of people just kind of jump right in. They try to memorize, they try to practice, but if you don't actually understand what you're attempting to memorize, you're kind of wasting time. We know that things you understand will be a lot easier to memorize. And if you understand them, and of course, therefore, if you haven't memorized, it makes the application portion of the bar exam that much easier. So how can you better understand the law? What can you do to maximize this second tip? Our first tip would be to attend your bar exam lectures. If that's not helping or you need more assistance, engage a bar exam tutor. And if you're still in law school and you're listening to these tips, I would advise you to take any class in law school that might be particularly challenging for you that's testable on the bar exam. Our third tip for how to study for the MEE is to memorize the highly tested areas. You don't have to know everything to pass the bar exam. This doesn't mean you ignore subjects or issues, but instead you want to become more efficient with your study time. So you focus on what is highly tested because that's more likely to come up. So a lot of people struggle with memorization. Just to give you a few tips about how to memorize. First of all, whenever you sit down and you try to memorize, whatever you're doing should be active. If you find that whatever you're doing is passive, maybe you're sitting still and you're silently reading your outline, that's not going to cut it. Do something active. You should be rewriting, making a chart, quizzing yourself, saying something aloud. Another tip for memorization is to take frequent breaks. This doesn't mean you go to the movies or take long breaks in the middle of the day. Instead, take short breaks. That helps you reset and then get back to it, and you're more efficient as a result. It's also helpful if you chunk information. So what I mean by this is instead of sitting down and saying, I have to memorize negligence, wow, that's 20 pages of my outline, I don't think I can do that. Instead, break it down into manageable chunks or pieces. First, focus on duty. Memorize duty. Once you've done that successfully, move on to breach. Memorize breach. Once you've done that, move on to causation, and so on and so forth. Finally, our last tip for you to help you memorize is set up a retention schedule. It's not enough to just memorize a subject for a week and move on and to hope and pray that you have it memorized by the time the bar exam rolls around. Instead, you should be setting up a schedule. We call it a retention schedule, where each week you carve out time to go back and review those subjects you've previously studied to make sure that you still have that information in the forefront of your mind. Our fourth tip on how to study for the MEE is to practice, practice, practice. Obviously, you need to memorize the law and have a good understanding of it, but you also have to know how to apply it and what is the expectation and what do these questions look like. So we recommend that you practice both timed and untimed questions. That way you get a feel for what the clock feels like, but you also get the advantage of doing these untimed where you take the pressure of the clock away. And our fifth tip for how to study for the MEE is to self-grade. A lot of people sit down, they'll write out an MEE answer, they feel proud of themselves, they read the examiner's analysis, and then they move on. They're skipping the self-grading step in that example. So what I would recommend you do is instead of just reading the examiner's analysis to see if you're right or you're wrong, Self-grade. Compare your issues. If you missed an issue, correct it. Compare your rule statement. If you missed it or you messed up, fix your rule statement. Compare your analysis to the examiner's analysis. If you analyzed something incorrectly or you focused on the wrong facts, fix it. And then finally, compare your conclusions for each of the issues tested. Again, if they're wrong, fix it. If it's correct, great. The reason this is so important is it really helps you understand what you're doing well and what needs to be improved upon. Additionally, taking this step to self-grade means you're more likely to remember these mistakes that you're making and therefore less likely to make those same mistakes in the future. This will also help increase your confidence because it's highlighting what you're doing well and you're going to see an improvement as a result of self-grading. And lastly, self-grading is helpful because it puts you in the mental state of a grader. And this is just going to improve your performance on the bar exam generally. So we hope that you found these tips for how to study for the MEE helpful. And if you're looking for any resources, please check out our blog and our website.